Now we're moving on to, I guess, yeah, the 10th episode. This is it. Sorry, I'm looking at my timer here. So this is the 10th episode, and it's called the Civil War of the First Crusade. Yay! So we just survived Antioch, and now this is where I guess everyone's just gonna start falling apart. That's great. All right, let's see what mess takes place in the Crusade this time, guys.
Was open. The triumph at Antioch was nothing short of miraculous. Heat, cold, disease and desertion failed to disperse the expedition, yet now the Council of Princes decided to stop and wait out the summer in order to recuperate. The plan was to leave for Jerusalem on November 1st, but in reality, no crusader would see the walls of the Holy City for over a year. Rather than consolidate, the Crusaders were split into two large camps, arguing over the claim over Antioch and the oath to Alexios. On one hand, everyone swore to return every city they took to the Romans, but on another, the princes agreed to cede the city to Bohemond provided that he took it, which he did. To settle the differences, the Crusaders sent out Hugh of Vermandois as an envoy to the Emperor. This brings us to one of the most important and misunderstood moments in this story. Did Alexios abandon the Crusaders? Back in June 1098,
You know, that's interesting. It's interesting that there's even a camp that's still like, we should give back to the Romans. That's kind of nice, because like, you know, you kind of get the impression that not many actually even care about the Romans at all. So it's kind of nice at least they were divided in that sense to like kind of honor it. So that was pretty nice. But then again, in the last video, they did specify that if Alexios doesn't come to our aid, we won't give him this. So I guess I could see the logic there. They feel abandoned since the Romans are just kind of not a presence there anymore. Yeah. Alexios mainly wanted this to be in Anatolia, though. They're going for Jerusalem itself. So, like, there's kind of like a divergence in, like, priority and whatnot. You know?
Alexios was leading an army in Anatolia and camped at Philomelion when he met Stephen of Blois and a couple of other deserters from the siege of Antioch. There, the Crusader told Alexios that the situation was hopeless and that he should abandon the cause. Latin sources denounce both men as cowards and pick this moment as the reason why their relationship soured, but the reality is, as usual, a lot more nuanced. Alexios did turn back, but he never intended to march as far as Antioch, due to the logistical strain it would entail on a large army, not to mention that he was well aware that his absence could lead to rebellion or even a civil war, both of which he had already had to deal with on multiple occasions. Furthermore, he also received news that the Seljuks were preparing another invasion, a threat he took seriously, since he evacuated the citizens of that region to protect them from the nomads. Indeed, an attack was attempted on Pipert, which ultimately failed due to the military prowess of the semi-autonomous leader of Trebizond, Theodoric Gabrus. So even when Hugh met Alexios in Constantinople some months later, the emperor could offer little more than the continuous naval supply that kept the Latins fed until this point. And yet the report that Bohemond was serious about keeping the city for himself infuriated the Byzantine court, ending their goodwill and starting a new phase in the history of the Crusade. Rather than return to his fellow crusaders, the Count left for France, only to be chastised by his countrymen, who saw him as a coward and embarrassment. He would later join the Crusade of 1101 and die fighting, but that is another story that we'll tell in the future.
That's interesting.
Back in Antioch, the lines were drawn, and
So yeah, definitely, like, I do kind of feel like the Romans certainly had, like I said, I never got the impression that many of these Crusaders ever actually cared about the Romans, or actually the goal of... A lot of this started because Alexios kind of wanted aid from the West, but a lot of these guys, obviously there are other things driving them, and I don't think helping the Romans just out of the kindness of their hearts is even that high on the list, personally. And you can kind of see it, like, with some of their self-interest, like with Baldwin, and Bohemond, just like Alexios probably at some aspect didn't trust him, and he was completely justified in not trusting these people. And overall, yeah, but obviously I do like that explanation, because, yeah, the Byzantines are a complete mess, dude. Between the constant civil wars and just being jumped, like, they have their own things to handle, so, you know, in fact, the supply line is still incredibly useful. That still is, I think, a good contribution to the overall cause. So, it's not like he's not doing anything, but yeah, again, there's just so much going on with the Roman Empire that, you know, that makes sense why Alexios isn't more there. I kind of like this because we're kind of a bit past extra histories telling. He kind of stops. Well, no, he gets to Jerusalem and some of that stuff, but obviously there's a lot different more details in this video that I like, especially with Alexios, because I feel like he just kind of disappears after he sends the Crusaders along their way in Nicaea. Here, at least we're getting some good insight into what the heck's going on with him and what he's thinking about all this, you know?
And most of the princes aligned themselves with Bohemond, secretly ceding their portions of the walls to him. Raymond of Toulouse positioned himself as his arch-nemesis and occupied the bridge gate, the lifeline to the coast, as well as the governor's palace. He even attempted to take the citadel for himself, but its commander, Ahmad ibn Marwan, proclaimed that he would only surrender to Bohemond. Despite being the most stubborn of the princes, when it came to swearing his oath to Alexios, Raymond insisted that the words he uttered while holding these sacred relics shouldn't be discarded, and he was willing to sabotage the entire crusade just so Bohemond wouldn't get what he wanted.
I love the pettiness. Like I said, the egos of these people is insane. Like, it's a miracle that it kind of does. I mentioned this, I keep mentioning this on and off, and I apologize, but it really does remind me of, like, my old D&D days. And how me and my group used to kind of argue and be petty like this. Like, I just keep remembering it. It kind of makes me laugh. And we like argued about a lot of things. Looking back, it's a miracle that anything got done at all. Kind of like the First Crusade in a sense, but yeah, especially when these two, like, it's already kind of established the tension, especially back in Constantinople, right? So, again, it's insane.
In the meantime, Bohemond was busy. He restored the Cathedral of St. Peter, allowed the Greek Patriarch John IV to return to his duties, and signed a deal with Genoa on July 14, 1098. This surviving document tells us so much about the political situation at the time. Genoa received 30 houses near the church and the rights to run a market on the square. Bohemond was not mentioned as the owner of the city, but Raymond was singled out from the rest of the Crusaders, and the Empire was not even mentioned. The Latins were at an impasse, and both parties were doing everything in their power to prevent the other from winning, while the lesser knights and peasants starved to death.
My goodness.
Antioch was now friendly territory, and Byzantine shipments dried up, leaving the less fortunate stuck, only a 3-week march away from their goal. The leaders made an extraordinary announcement, declaring that all participants could freely change their liege lord. This was a game changer, and it's important to take a moment to explain, because we often forget that the medieval world was one bound by religion and vassalage, not culture and nationalities. There was a strict social structure and hierarchy, which was maintained throughout the long expedition, with liege lords big and small on the top, and knights who swore fealty to them below. Additionally, there was a substantial number of commoners hired by the same lords. What we've seen so far was half a dozen branches from different parts of Europe, but in reality, there were hundreds of them to begin with. There was a complicated system of oaths of fealty holding it all together, which was not always based on dynastic ties. For example, Bohemond's nephew, Tancred, was a leader in his own right, with a retinue of his own. So why did the Crusade leaders decide to unravel this structure? On one hand, Some were wealthier than others, either due to the funds they had raised at the start of this journey, or because they were more efficient in looting. But more importantly, the mounting death toll as a result of battles, weather, famine, and disease had killed an enormous number of the Latins, both high and low-born. There were many followers who lost their liege lord and were now free of their oaths, so all traditional ties were now broken, and many flocked to the rich entourage of Remor, but even more decided to join the firmly established county of Edessa as mercenaries. Its ruler Baldwin used this manpower to capture local towns and forts, such as Tel Bashir. What the Crusaders didn't anticipate, however, was for several lesser lords to use this opportunity to carve out domains of their own, such as Raymond Pillet, who gathered a small force and attacked the fertile Jabal as-Samak plateau. He briefly besieged a castle called Telmanis before its occupants, Syrian Christians, welcomed him inside and accepted his lordship. A week later, he attacked an unnamed castle and reenacted the terrifying chapters of the People's Crusade by slaughtering thousands of Muslims who refused his forced conversion. From there, he left overconfident and low on supplies to take the large city of Marat an-Numan. As the garrison saw his contingent, they sallied out and killed nearly every single member of the expedition. There were probably many small-scale adventures such as this one, but no others are recorded. Tensions were rising, manpower and supplies were depleting, and the connection with the Empire was severed. But the Crusade could still be salvaged, because as always, Bishop Adhemar was there to moderate and lead the princes to a compromise.
Adhemar, man, he has been the great compromiser. I feel like Adhemar has been kind of like an unsung hero this entire story. Like, between the way he's been able to keep everyone's morale up in times where it seems like it was gonna break, or like, you know, just kind of mediating and talking. I feel like he's kind of been an unsung hero. And again, everything looks bad again, huh? And it makes sense with the system of vassalage, because I am aware of the medieval system in that sense. So, yeah, but like with liege lords dead and stuff, it's like the lines have kind of been blurred by the way things have kind of been done in you know, Europe. So like at this point, it's kind of like, I kind of like that blurring of lines, as like, you know, how you see the Crusaders kind of adopting Turkish strategy, like with Bohemond, or like them having to lose their horses, their symbols of status from Europe, and relying on other means. You know, now this system of just like, how do you say, like, just go to whoever you want. I don't know, it's like, it's almost like they're shedding kind of like parts of their more European identity to kind of adapt to this new, you know, area that they're in, this new world, as it were. And I don't know, I think that's just an interesting aspect of the Crusaders. And again, they're still in a bad position. The Romans are now no longer supplying. They're losing so much, like, manpower and stuff. Like, again, things don't look so hot. And it's like the story of the First Crusade, huh? Things don't look good, and then somehow it all works out. I kind of really like that. It just somehow keeps working out. I don't know how, but I don't know, I just find that such a cool aspect of this, you know?
Until he died on the 1st of August.
Oh.
At the time, most of the princes left the city to pursue their own interests, leaving behind only the poorest crusaders and the local population. As usual, the charitable defender of the less fortunate Adhemar stayed behind, as a typhoid epidemic swept through the city. Some modern estimates indicate that over 100,000 people died across the region in the span of a few months, with the spiritual leader and papal legate being one of the first to succumb. At the exact same time,
dang, dude, rip Adhemar, man. Like I said, I feel like he was kind of an unsung hero in this entire event.
1,500 fresh German crusaders arrived, eager to join the crusade, only to be annihilated by the deadly disease. The consequences this had on morale were devastating. As historian J. Rubenstein puts it, if the Franks were the chosen people wandering through the desert, Adhemar had been their Moses.
Wow. And that sucks for those German crusaders. They just show up, heck yeah, and then just die. Yo, that sucks, dude. And again, now it just seems like everyone has just gone off. Like they were already kind of doing their own side quests, like with Baldwin and stuff. But now it seems like the party has broken up and they're all just gonna go do their own thing now.
But before his body was even cold, politics came into play, as Peter Bartholomew, the man who received visions that led to the discovery of the Holy Lance, used this as an opportunity to become a prophet. Within 48 hours of the bishop's death on the 1st of August, Peter Bartholomew claimed to receive his first vision of Adamar's spirit. According to him, they had a conversation, where the bishop admitted that his doubt of the authenticity of the Holy Lance led him to hell. Following the uncovering of the lance,
you know what that kind of gives me vibes of? Have you guys ever read Dante's Divine Comedy? I like it because Dante puts people he doesn't like into hell. You know, it's comprised of 3 books. You know, heaven, purgatory, hell, or paradiso, not heaven, but you know what I mean. I remember that for university, we had to read it. At least some of the hell section. And, well, actually not all, we actually did read, the entire Inferno section, sorry. But, it's funny because I said Dante would just put people he doesn't like into hell, like popes and stuff, and then be like, oh, I was wrong, like he's writing it. It came across like someone writing, you know, it came across as petty. And I feel like Peter just gave me that vibe, like, oh, this guy who doubted me, he's in hell now, like, you see? I don't know, it just kind of gave me that vibe. Brought back some memories there.
Sinned deeply, and so was drawn down to hell, whipped most severely, and as you can see, my head and face were burned. Bohemond said that he would carry my body to Jerusalem. For his sake, he shall not move my corpse from its resting place, because some of the blood of Christ, with whom I am now associated, remains there. But if he doubts my statements, let him open my tomb, and he shall see my burned head and face.
At Wells Fargo.
No one was more respected than Adamar, who was buried at the same place where the lance was found. And now Peter used his spirit to reshape politics and boost his own legitimacy, basically appointing himself as the new spiritual leader. In another claimed vision of St. Andrew, Peter relayed the message that the city should not be given to Alexios or Raymond, and that the 2 parties should make peace. Despite being a part of Raymond's retinue, the self-made prophet now had an agenda of his own, and answered to no one, which gained him the adoration of the masses.
You know, that's what he's going for is a smart approach in a sense that, as we saw with, like, the Hermit in the People's Crusade, rallying up the common folk, especially the ones who've just straight up been abandoned, like the lower class knight and peasants, pretty effective. It's easier to rile them up, huh? Especially now with this, and he does seem to have his own agenda. I'm wondering what he's trying to accomplish, or where he's trying to go. Obviously, the spiritual leader prestige, but I'm like wondering what he hopes to gain also in the long run, like to be established in his own kind of like ministry or something. That's he's a new interesting figure, you know.
The third major leader of the Crusade, Godfrey of Boulogne, grew in popularity and strength. His wealth attracted many Latins, and his brother gave him the towns of Tel Bashir and Ravendan. Around this time, Omar, a local Muslim ruler of the city of Azaz, approached him for aid against Ridwan of Aleppo, giving his own son as a hostage. When Godfrey finally agreed, the news was carried back to Azaz via carrier pigeon. Godfrey duly led a relief force towards Azaz and quickly frightened off the Aleppan army. Raymond rushed to try to get a slice of the pie, but was too late. Godfrey received a richly decorated armor, inlaid with gold and silver, as well as a lot of prestige. Bohemond, on the other hand, was busy in Armenian Cilicia, where his nephew Tancred had secured a Norman foothold. Bohemond was the most charismatic and won the most victories, but he was content with what he had achieved and would go no further, leaving Godfrey and Raymond to compete for the Crusade's leadership.
That's interesting. You know, I often kind of do praise that aspect of, I'm gonna stop while I'm ahead, so it does seem like Bohemond got what he wanted. He kind of got the prestige. He got the glory of winning so many battles, basically carrying the militaristic like journey so far of the Crusaders on his back, and you know, got to get Antioch. So, or at least I'm not sure if it's gonna remain there, but either way, he seems to be doing well for himself. But Bohemond kind of came out with this with a lot, right? Meanwhile, everyone else seems to be flounder, trying just to get as much as they can, Essentially, we're seeing the beginning of the Crusader states kingdoms, which is really cool, actually. I think that's a very underrated part in history.
Despite his old age and rivalry with most of the other Crusaders, Raymond still possessed the Holy Lance and the largest contingent, but not enough to break the deadlock. And so the Crusaders turned to the man who initially caused the Crusade, Urban II. On the 11th of September, a joint letter was sent to Rome, relating the news of Ademar's death and imploring the Pope to lead the Crusade in person. Since you initiated this pilgrimage, and by your sermons have caused us all to leave your lands, we now beg you to come to us and urge whomsoever you can to come with you. It was here, in Antioch, that the name of Christian first originated. Therefore, what in the world would seem more proper than that you, who are the father and head of the Christian religion, should come to the principal city and capital of the Christian name and finish the war, which is your project, in person.
Wow. Alright, way to call him out for sure. and completely, it sounds completely right? Dang. I don't remember if he actually goes though, but like I said, it's been a while since the extra history thing. Some things I remember, some things I don't, but still.
If you come to us and finish with us the pilgrimage that you inaugurated, the whole world will be obedient to you. Similarly to Alexios, Urban II was busy with other affairs in Europe and couldn't risk the journey to the Holy Lands. With the ongoing leadership struggle, the date when the Crusaders were planning to depart to Jerusalem, November 1st, arrived, yet no leader was mobilizing their force as they continued to argue. Disgruntled gossip turned into rebellion as the lower ranks protested. It is obvious that our leaders, because of cowardice or because of the oath of Alexius, do not wish to lead us to Jerusalem. If the Antiochian quarrel continues, let us tear down the city's walls. Then the era of princely goodwill existing prior to its capture will return with its destruction. Otherwise, we should turn back to our lands before hunger and fatigue exhaust us.
Yeah, you kind of had to remember, I guess some of the more common people, they're there for, they're more driven by religious fervor than I feel like the princes are. The princes, obviously, there is that aspect of religious, fervor, but, they also are interested in, their own gain, whether that be in land and territory and etc. The more lower people kind of just want to go on this holy journey, this is a godly journey to them, and Jerusalem is the final goal, the holy city itself, so them kind of wasting around would more than enough frustrate them, right? So it's kind of interesting when you remember the lower groups of people are the more numerous, and in a way probably are the ones you should usually we see them get ignored or abused by higher ups, but then you remember if you get them angry enough, they can actually straight up be a danger to you. We saw the People's Crusade and how wild things can get if they're disgruntled. So yeah.
The winter months continued to drag on, and Raymond was unwilling to let go of his bitter rivalry with Bohemond. His main goal was building a platform centered around his holy relic, hoping to gain more support. But he soon realized that the only way he could take Antioch from him was to confront him with more than just words. The prince then decided that he would indirectly attack the Norman by establishing his own base around Antioch and starve out Bohemond and everyone who supported him.
He literally is about to put him to siege, what the heck? Dude, I'm telling you, the First Crusade is such a complete crap show. I love it. It's great.
Raymond already controlled the way to the sea, so now he only had to secure the south by taking the city and succeeding where his namesake Raymond Pelé failed. And so, after their greatest triumph, where they managed to take the strongest citadel in the Levant, defeating a capable garrison and 3 relief armies in the process, the Crusaders were now on the brink of self-destruction. It is easy to consider them as foolish and greedy, as you can see, but the reality was a lot more complicated. This was an expedition featuring dozens of leaders with different characters, who experienced some of the harshest conditions and fought the same opponents who crippled the Eastern Roman Empire. The plot twists and challenges, no doubt, changed many of them. And finally, the desertion and rebellion of many of their followers shows that the leaders didn't fully represent the entire expedition. These were not one-note characters, and now without Bishop Adhemar, their differences would collide and pull them in 3 separate directions.
Again, Adhemar, man, like, he was really important. And, again, like I said, I know I've kind of been talking a lot about these guys' self-interest and whatnot, and obviously, you know, as with most things in history, and with most people, there's so many more layers to it. And all that. But, yeah, you can't, I feel like it's just hard to deny that there is a lot of ego here, and a lot of, you know, like, just, like, rivalry and, like, you know, quarrels and whatnot, so I don't know. Either way, still a really interesting thing, and I'm gonna end the video right here, and I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow.